Welcome back to the balance sheet. I am your host, King Ajar. I have my co-host here, Billy.
What's up, everyone?
And this week we're on a little bit of a time crunch, so we're going to get right to it. A huge, uh, I guess, shift happened this week in women's wrestling in terms of the WWE women's titles. We had two of them change hands this week. Let's start right at the top. Billy, Rhea Ripley, as we both predicted, did win the women's world title on the Netflix premiere of Monday Night Raw. And I will let you get started with the match. But I will say it wasn't as competitive as I thought it would be.
Yeah, I mean, it just wasn't, it wasn't booked to make us remember what happened in the match. And that's the nicest way I could say it from, because it's not Liv's fault, it's not Rhea's fault, but it wasn't booked in a way where they really had a chance that we would remember too much of what happened. There's a commercial break, which I won't pick on too much because there was actually surprisingly a commercial break during CM Punk and Seth Rollins, which I thought was crazy. So maybe that's going to be a Netflix thing going forward. But earlier in the show, before I knew that was going to happen, I'm sitting there going, a commercial break, the women's championship. So I was pretty hot about that. But um, I mean, not much left to say. It was kind of match the feud. It was underwhelming. You knew who was going to win. Um, on a positive note, I thought the spot at the end where Rhea caught her and they kind of had that moment, I mean, that was cool. That would have been a great moment at the end of a very good match. Um, but you had Raquel interference, you had Dom interference, and ultimately they told you at the end what the most important thing was, and that was Dom, not the belt, because the end, the thing to pop the crowd was her giving a riptide to Dom, and the belt was in the back seat. So, um, not a fan of that, and hopefully ready to move on for Rhea, and I will say fairly as well. I want Liv to pivot into something good too. So it's not just about Rhea moving on; it's about Liv moving on.
I am very disappointed in WWE for how they handled this feud from the beginning. These two women are great in the ring. They have shown that they can be great in the ring. They're both very good to some could say great on the microphone. They have a huge history with each other. They went for tag team titles. They both costed each other titles. They injured each other. And, in the end, the story did become about a guy. And, it's one of the things you hate to see with women's storylines where they end
Hmm.
up fighting over the guy. And that's what the story ended up becoming. It became a love story, a triangle. Hey, I took your man, I took everything from you. And like I said, I I'm very disappointed at how the feud transpired, I guess, because they didn't produce a great match. They produced some moments. I think the Dom turn in SummerSlam was well done. I think how they
Yeah.
set stuff up to get to that point where Dom accidentally costed Becky the belt, but really he was setting Liv up to win the belt the whole time. Him and Liv have been in cahoots. We don't know how long. I think Raquel being brought in, which is a prediction I made, was an absolute flop. I don't know if you could have done that thing worse. Raquel never got one advantage on Rhea, and she just became a punching bag for Rhea. And what it told me about this feud and the importance of it is that the two things I'm going to remember is one, Dom getting kicked and getting the riptide, and number two, the Undertaker coming out and handing a torch to Rhea Ripley, which actually is a pretty big deal that one of the biggest male stars in the history of this company came out on his American Badass bike gimmick and handed the torch to Rhea Ripley, a woman, a foreign born woman to be that. So that tells you what they think of Rhea Ripley. to them, Rhea Ripley is, forget about Riptide, it's Skyrocket. I mean, that's what it
Yeah.
is for her, right? Like she is the face of the women's division on that show. And again, it's a feud that did a lot of numbers. It did great on YouTube. It did great on TV. It made evented a lot. It got a lot of ratings. It was great for Twitter. But as much as the people loved this feud, Billy, I thought people hated this feud too. I think a lot of people came around to your opinion. Like I think you were very early, and you got
Yeah.
to get credit for this. Hey, I don't know. This is getting too much about the guy. Like, I don't know if I'm getting all the way invested in this thing. And you called it months ago. I mean, you called it around SummerSlam. Well, we're already in January. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think our second or third episode was about Rhea, and she had that Monday night episode that was just built around her. And
Hmm.
there was every reason in the world to just feel like this could have been the biggest storyline in women's history, just based off of time, energy, and effort.
Yeah.
And it got a lot of time, but the point of view got muddier and muddier and less about you know the way you set up your point. You're like, they were friends, they won titles together, they cost each other titles, and they injured each other. I mean, that's the setting for one of the greatest women's feuds ever, and they just whiffed. And um I don't pretend to know what's going on behind the scenes entirely, who wrote all, who was the lead producer and writer of all that. But, um, you know, when people want to say Triple H is the savior of women's wrestling, I would very quickly point, the savior, air quotes, because of the way he books the women. I would very quickly point at this and say, you know, this is not, this is not what we want as women's wrestling fans, for that feud to be about Dom. It just, no.
Women's wrestling, right? The second word of that is wrestling. The
Yeah.
problem with this feud is at the end of the day, in any professional wrestling feud, male or women, you got to deliver a match. How many feuds are all-time feuds without the match? Right? Like
Right.
how many feuds, like if you just look at Savage Steamboat, you remember how Savage injured Steamboat up to WrestleMania 3, but you remember it because the match delivered.
Yep.
Sasha Bailey Brooklyn. The reason it delivered in the ring, but it also led up very well to the match, but the match over delivered. So it's like you have the match and the story. This what I'm happy about is the fact that all the YouTube numbers and all the data says this was a success. That's good. And here's why. Because then now Triple H, whoever else is in charge, can not say, well, we put all this time into the women and they didn't deliver the money, the ratings. So good. They delivered the ratings, they delivered the views and the data they want and they covet. So now I expect them to put this much time into other women's feuds. But then what I would ask Triple H and the people booking is let the women at the end give us the match. Because
Yep.
I believe Rhea and Liv could have given us a very good wrestling match at
Agree.
some
I
point
agree.
in this feud, but they didn't. They gave us very little in the ring that I'll ever remember.
Yeah. And with many, not the right chance all at once. Again, I prefaced it wasn't their fault they didn't deliver on the Netflix
No.
show, because you have to be given X amount of time, and kind of allowed to lay out a great match. You can't just force one in 11 minutes, or I don't know how much time they were in there, but with interference and all that stuff, it just
Yeah,
wasn't going to work. But they had what, 4 or 5 matches this year. You'd
yeah,
almost rather, you know, I was reminded on a year long recap of Mercedes and AEW that her feud with Britt was actually very good on TV.
hmm it was.
It was the best TV that Mercedes has had all year, like weekly TV, not wrestling. But it doesn't matter because the match sucked. But
Hmm.
imagine, and I say sucked, I don't think it sucked, but it didn't live up. Um, But if they did it 3 times and it wasn't didn't make it there all 3 times, it'd be even worse. And that's kind of like, you know, the best thing for this, I think Rhea will be immediately hot if they move her, whatever they're gonna do. She's gonna get a pop next week. Um, I think whatever feud she has coming up will be well received. She's been chasing around with not just Liv, but Dom and all that for what feels like forever. I really hope this is one of those things where you have Liv off TV for like a just a week or two, not too long, and I'd like to see her have a huge showing in the Royal Rumble. Um, I can't pertain to know what she does, but I'm just gonna say it. The WrestleMania card looks difficult to get on, and I think I said it a week or two
Mhm.
ago. I would hate to see her have trouble getting on that card because she delivered views, delivered
Mhm.
ratings, delivering in merch, can deliver in the ring. Just it just wasn't working with this current one, but I'd love to see her continue to be in the spotlight. Just not with Rhea for right now. In a
I would
different spotlight,
I would move her to SmackDown,
for sure.
and I would get her and Rhea far apart from each other on a show because they're going to have the tendency just put them back together if there's nothing for either of them just to rekindle something. And I don't think that's good. That reminds me of the dark ages of how they would book women. I think the other thing that is a little bit disappointing here is that I don't I don't think anything was good about this feud in the ring except for one match, which was the mixed tag, which again now involves two guys.
Yeah,
I thought Damian Priest and Rhea to me were the peak of this feud. Like them as the Terror Twins, where every week they get beat up by the five of them, and then they finally got their revenge and just wiped everybody out. I thought that was some entertaining stuff. Once they
yeah,
broke apart the Terror Twins, and then Rhea still beat up everybody, then it's like Raquel is supposed to be like a Rhea equal. Like she's supposed to be someone who can give Rhea a fight. She got rolled every time. I hated this match on Monday, and I hated it for a lot of reasons. But one of the reasons I hated it is you have two people on the outside to help Liv, and it felt like Liv got dominated. Like it just felt like
right.
she got two rip tides and pinned so clean, and then the other two are just laying out there. And then she beat up the other two too. So it's like I get it. You want to tell us that Rhea is this dominant machine and she is unstoppable. You've been telling us that for 2 years.
Yeah,
I mean, she's never lost without like a lot of people going, like you said, the way they booked the Undertaker, where you have to like have a 3-on-1, 4-on-1, 2-on-1 to beat her. But like at this point, I'm almost worried about women who go into feuds with Rhea because I don't know if they'll come out looking better, to be
right.
honest. And I'm a Rhea fan, so
No, it kind of reminds me of, I mean, the Undertaker is probably apropos to come out and pass the torch. It's funny is they did have some good matches and they had some great moments. So people remember it, but off the top of my head, Kane was supposed to be the brother, the equal, 50-50, all that. I don't recall a single match that mattered a lot that Kane came out on top of. The whole, like in 20 years.
I
I
think
know
it might
Kane
be
lost the
the
WrestleMania 14 match.
there was a time where Kane got really hot when he electrocuted Shade.
Yeah. No, I mean
And
against the Undertaker.
yeah, yeah, no. And in that time, he beat Undertaker in a buried alive match where they kind of made it seem like, oh, Undertaker was done. And then Undertaker came back at WrestleMania 20 and beat him. But he leading up to WrestleMania 20, Kane kind of got the better of him the previous year. But to your point, when it came to the really big matches, the Undertaker won those matches. So it doesn't really matter. And then the thing about that feud is all the memorable matches are stip matches.
Yeah,
Inferno match, buried alive, Hell in a Cell, stuff like that. So, you know, I we'll see what they do with Rhea. I agree with you. I'm more worried about what they do with Liv because Liv has earned a top tier spot. And my
right.
fear is Liv just going to be fed to somebody to get them more over. Like I just look at this thing. Is Elimination Chamber going to be Liv going to SmackDown and fighting Tiffany and losing? Is that like Elimination Chamber's women's match?
Right. And the last woman they did this to, and it's the reason we're worried, the WrestleMania thing, loses the title, gets fed, is Bailey.
Hmm.
And I almost wonder now that I think about it, the Tiffany match is next week, right?
Yeah, she's getting fed. Yeah,
So does Bailey lose and then you trade Liv for Bailey?
I think so. Yeah,
That's a
I think
great, I mean,
that's
that's Bailey is as, I think that's actually a great for both women because for the last year, Liv's been champion. So for your new fan, Liv has a high amount of
mhm.
stature. And obviously your classic fan, Bailey's a legend. And so trading the two of them tells your new fan that Bailey continues to be important. And it tells your traditional older fan that Liv has ascended to this level where she could be traded for a horsewoman. And I actually think that that's fair and it's great for both women. I don't know if they have to do trades or if it's just open portal, but they haven't really had a big move yet, have they?
Well, Bailey has been teasing going to Raw for a while because she's
Right,
been
with Pierce.
backstage and she's been in the suite and all that stuff with Raw. They have not teased anything about Liv going to SmackDown, but I think that is the move you make. I think Bailey loses this Friday, and we can talk about Bailey right now. Bailey loses this Friday to Tiffany, goes to Raw. Liv is already lost. She goes to SmackDown. That's kind of the big transfer portal for the women trade. Um, in Liv Morgan and Raquel coming over, you immediately have a feud for Bianca and Naomi, right?
Yep.
You
Yep.
have a way of getting the belts off of Bianca and Naomi to start their feud. And by the way, we'll talk about SmackDown right now. Bailey is your number one contender. She won a fatal four-way match with the women's tag champs and the former women's champion, along with Bailey going after the newly minted Tiffany Stratton's women's title. What was interesting is they started, Bianca hit Naomi with the braid. I think they're planting some seeds here for Bianca Naomi at WrestleMania because I think you're going to start to see slowly but surely, like you saw them face off. The crowd went really crazy for that face off. They wanted to see these two fight. Then, stuff happened. So I think Bianca Naomi, in my opinion, looks like the WrestleMania direction. I know a lot of people don't like what they're doing with Bianca because they're like, oh my God, we want Super Bianca back. We want the person who beat everybody up in singles. I think you're going to get that Bianca. I think you're going to get her after WrestleMania. I think up to this point, she's kind of just they're kind of doing with her what they did the first go around when she came in before she got the main event, where you remember she was in these like weird feuds. She never
Yeah.
lost, but they kind of just hid her because they had plans. They have plans for Bianca. I'm not worried. If it's one woman I'm not worried about, it's Bianca Belair. She'll be fine.
No, I agree. And I'm actually really excited about the Naomi um arc. I think Bianca and Naomi can deliver the best women's WrestleMania singles match of what seems to be out there. I mean, Charlotte could always bring her tens and her and Tiffany could absolutely have a great match, but um depending on when Charlotte comes back, how much time they have to put into that. But I think if they do a Naomi turn the right way with as over as Bianca is, I think we could see a really, really good match. And um I don't love the women's tag champs being in the fatal four way for reasons why that's kind of what always seems to happen. But they need to pull the trigger on this Naomi turn, and I'll tell you why. I have a friend we have on X that is Naomi fan, and I'm pretty sure one of the tweets has been Naomi's basically been in Happy Glow Land since 2017. You know, she since 2017, she's had the techno music, you know, the fun dance music, the smile. She's done as much as she can with it, right? I mean, they've had little hints here and there where it seems like her creative direction got stalled. But if you look at long periods of time, since 2017, she's been a version of this character. And we know that she's got the ability to be way more layered from her, you know, she was the leader of Team Bad, right? You know,
Hmm.
she was the um, you know, the head of that group with Sasha and Tamina, certainly at the beginning at least. And you know, I'm really excited to see them let her do more, even if it's in a heel role, turning her back on Bianca. I think God, if they really give it the time and effort, it could be really good. And I think those two can have a great match at Mania. So when that was my favorite part of the four way is when the hair whip hit, I was like, oh, is that are we doing it? Um, and then you know Bailey pins Naomi, so that kind of plants a seed there too, where Naomi basically ditches all of her
Hmm.
relationships and friends, and I assume they align her with Lash Legend and Jakara would be perfect because
Yeah.
I want to see them come up to the main roster on a platform, but
Well,
we'll see what they do.
they can set this up very nicely. Those two are fighting on NXT, and the winner of that tag match gets the number one contender spot for the women's tag belts.
Yep,
What you can do is you can have Naomi turn on Bianca in the match, have Jakara and Lash win the titles. Naomi reveals as this is her master plan. And honestly, I know this is going to be a very dark thing that people probably will like, oh, you can't do that. Yeah, you can. I think Naomi needs to cut her braid. I think Naomi needs to cut, they need to beat Bianca up, lay her out. And I think that Naomi needs to cut her braid and carry it around as a trophy. Like almost put the braid on a necklace and wear it. And that's what I would do. And that's how you get the dark Naomi. I also think Naomi needs to ditch the colors and go with all black. I think her, Jakara, and Lash should be this badass trio who just keeps laying Bianca out. I think come WrestleMania, that's when Jade returns. She returns to save Bianca, and then it is revealed that Naomi is the one behind the beating for Jade. And then you could have Naomi and Jade spin off in a feud, and Bianca could go to Raw because they're going to set up her versus Rhea. I'm almost convinced now. So I think that's what you got to do. Bianca should win at WrestleMania, but in a way that she is helped by Jade, so it doesn't weaken Naomi, and Naomi now has a reason to fight Jade. It's very easy and simple storytelling. They have an opportunity to do it. And when I saw Jakara and Lash as the oh, they're going for the tag belts. And then I saw what happened with Naomi and the braid. I'm like, ooh, maybe they are going to do this because it's simple wrestling, it's simple storytelling. And Naomi deserves this because she needs to be a prominent. She can't, she keeps being everybody else's bridesmaid. She needs to be the star. Like they need to build something around her. And
agree.
even though she has to lose, because look, they're not going to make Bianca lose at WrestleMania to Naomi. I think Naomi's great, but when Bianca loses at WrestleMania, it's going to be a big deal. It's going to be to like I don't know, Jada Parker or some or Stephanie McCool. It's going to be to somebody they are
Trying to
trying to
make
yeah. Nonetheless, she can still lose at WrestleMania, but still be very effective in her role. And I think they need to let Naomi cut dark promos. Like Naomi has to talk about, hey, and I know WWE hates doing this, but she needs to say, look, I walked out with another woman. And you know what? That other woman, she's wrestling all over the world, winning everywhere. And what am I doing here? I came back with expectations and promises that I was going to be something, and none of it has. And Bailey has used me, and Bianca has used me, and everybody's used me, and I'm tired of it. Now it's my time. They have to. Now here's the thing that they can be very careful about. Naomi is such a revered figure online, on social media, and in the arena. They could run the risk of her getting people to turn on Bianca, but how you could mitigate that is even if it happens, you just quickly move Bianca to the other show and you keep them away from each other. Then if Naomi gets more cheers than a Tiffany or gets then you live with it. You can't have them do that to Bianca, but it is going to happen. I think this
Well,
could be very Randy Savage. I hate to use this compare, be very Randy Savage, Hulk Hogan, Mega Powers, where when they broke up in house shows, Savage was getting more cheers than Hogan.
yeah.
And even WrestleMania 5, if for those of you who don't know how it used to work back in the day, WrestleMania came on in the afternoon. So they would have the show start at like 4 p.m. Eastern. They would give you the first, they had like a 10-second delay back then where they could dub in sound. So at WrestleMania 5, they purposely made you think Hogan was this super over baby face and Savage was this heel because a lot of the sound was dubbed in. But Savage was actually 50-50 in that crowd. They can't really do that now. There's too much social media. So yeah.
Right. Obviously it could be controversial, the braid thing. Bianca did cut Becky's hair, so I would
Mhm.
assume that again, that's a decision the performers make. That would be the type of moment that I don't think, like, I think Naomi would get real, like, if you really want to make sure she gets heat, molten lava heat, we hate you, that's probably the move. If she just becomes a scorned badass heel, there are going to be a lot of people that are like, yeah, you've been screwed for years.
Mhm.
I love it. I'm glad you're not taking anyone's crap anymore. And they would be into it. Um, Bailey's going to lose to Tiffany. We kind of touched on that. I actually think it's a great move because her and Tiffany can have a really, really good match. Um, the cash in title runs have not the cash ins have been great. The cash in title runs have generally not been great. EO uh notwithstanding. But
Bailey.
yeah, but even that one, technically speaking, ended 2 months later, and then she got the title back and had to
Yeah.
do a heel turn on that one.
Mhm.
But the face version of that title win was not.
No, it wasn't. And she lost to
Yeah,
Charlotte. Yeah.
yeah, in like a 8 minute match or something like that.
Mhm.
It's not a yeah. Anyway, um, no, I think it could be great for Tiffany and nobody better in that position than Bailey. Um, NXT, the probably best women's champion, certainly in the ring. Last year for WWE has been dethroned.
Mhm.
Um, we did get some call outs on our top 10 matches that neither one of us had a Roxanne match in there.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, she had 4 or 5 of the top 20. It just so happened that they were all in that, for argument's sake, call it 7 to 18 range. And for our particular tastes and where the good matches happened at, didn't land in our top 10. But as we get to our top 10 wrestlers of the year, she ranked very highly for me. I'm sure she did for you as well.
Mhm.
But the reign is over and Julia has been crowned. What'd you think of the match?
So I loved the match, but before I go to the match, I wanted to just quickly go back to the SmackDown segment. I just want everybody to realize that if you don't think Tiffany is over, watch her reactions on Monday Night Raw when they showed her. She got one of the loudest pops in
Yeah,
LA. And when she took everybody out with the prettiest moonsault ever, the crowd went bonkers for her. So it's up to them to capitalize on her popularity. I agree. I'm not all the way sold that they're going to give her the time in the ring to deliver the matches, but she is damn over. And I don't know if they're going to take. I mean, I used to think, oh, Charlotte's just going to come in and beat her for the title at Mania. I don't know if I do that now. She's hot. I mean, I looked at that crowd closely. There's a lot of Tiffany signs in that crowd, and
Yep.
I think it threw her off because I don't think she knows how to be a babyface yet. She doesn't
No.
know. He's like, oh, you people, they're cheering you, Tiffany. Like they're all cheering you, So I think she's gonna have to learn, and I think it's very dangerous. She could get herself very not over, and I'll go back to Julia and Roxanne here by being a stale baby face. Because what people liked about Tiffany is the arrogant, cocky, I'm better than you, Tiffany. She goes back to being white meat babyface. I don't know if that works for her character. I don't think it works for her at all. I think she'll be in Alexa Bliss land where she is a tepid babyface. But yeah, Roxanne Julia to me, I thought had you've made the case that how you lose the title, if you lose it in the right situation, right match, right opponent, right setting, could define your title reign, a la, Sasha Banks losing to Bailey. I think one
Yep.
of the worst things they did in NXT, one of the best title reigns of all time was Asuka. You can make the case Asuka is the best female character of all time in NXT because she didn't lose. But I
Yep.
hated that she just came in. You know what? I have beat everybody here. Take the belt. I'm going to the main roster. You guys do a
100%.
tournament. I thought that was terrible. I thought if they ever wanted to make, now the Athena, then Amber Moon a star, she should have beat Asuka, and then they moved up Asuka. But they screwed that whole thing up. Back to this. This is how you do it. Roxanne has been a phenomenal champion. I could make the case she's been the best NXT women's champion on the heel side. Shayna comes to mind. Sasha Banks for sure come to mind. And she has had great matches. Yes, she didn't make our top 10 matches, but look at her degree of difficulty. Jada Parker, very green, had a great match with her. Lola Vice, very green, had a great match with her. Thea Hale, green, great match with her. Yeah, Grace is not green for sure, but that's a tricky spot because you have somebody from another promotion. So you have to
Yep.
make that person look good too. Roxanne delivered in the ring. Roxanne delivered on the microphone. Roxanne delivered as a character. She was A plus as a NXT champion, and she lost to the right person because clearly from the day Julia has come into the company, she and Stephanie have been put on a pedestal. And she, she got the win over Julia, the first win to set up the Cora and her reuniting, but she lost to Julia as she should have. And the
Yep.
crowd is clearly loves Julia. They went crazy for her win. The beautiful madness is now the beautiful champion. And Roxanne has nothing to feel ashamed about. She was a great champion, and she's going to go to the main roster. And I hope they let her do great things on the main roster. But I loved the match. I thought it was hard hitting. I thought it was very fast, very crisp. I thought it was definitely Julia's best match in WWE for
For
sure.
sure.
Um, I like Roxanne Lola maybe as much, slightly more. I like this match for the result because I was like, you never know with Triple H. Oh, does Julia lose again and then finally get the win? Like sometimes he doesn't pull the trigger. So I loved it. I was glad it opened the show. Uh, I thought Booker T as like the Roxanne mentor on commentary adds a lot to her matches because he's so biased towards her.
Yeah.
So I think that was good.
Yeah, I love the match. I think I haven't seen every women's match that's occurred in 2025. I think it's the best women's match of the year of consequence so far. Narrowly, if I was scoring them, I'd probably give it 0.25 ahead of the Mina Mercedes match, which I also liked a lot. Probably a 4 and a 4.25 for the Julia match. The result certainly helps. It was absolutely Julia's best showing thus far. Um, Roxanne bookended her title run beautifully. It will go down in history as one of the greatest NXT runs ever.
Hmm.
Um, you know, that is the best lineage in women's wrestling. If you go all the way back to the beginning, and for anyone who hasn't seen it, they did a promo video for that match leading into it. It was like a 3.5 minute long, the history of
Hmm.
the NXT women's title, and they didn't hide anything. Sasha Banks, Mandy Rose, people who they kind of don't talk about. They were in it. They were glorified for what they did with the belt. Um, and that is just, there is not another title I can think of. Maybe the men's intercontinental title for most of its history,
Yeah.
where when you get it, it's like a sign of prominence that it's like you're gonna be something. Certainly, when you get time with the intercontinental title, it's a great sign for. But the NXT Women's title is the Star Maker title in that company, and they've done just a great job making it important. I will say Roxanne is the biggest test of the Triple H era on the women's roster. The biggest test
Hmm.
by far, and I will explain why. When he took over, um, Bianca was already minted a star. Rhea was already minted a star on the main roster. You had Liv already, on has done some great things. You had three horsewomen. Um, to help him with some of the other women and all that. Roxanne is great on the mic, but the reason she could ever be champion, like in a world with Rhea Ripley and Bianca on the same roster as her, navigating that is almost exactly how you would navigate Sasha Banks being champion. It will look the same way on the main roster. Sasha Banks was so believable beating Charlotte Flair, and no one ever doubted it. No one was ever like, you know, Charlotte Flair is this specimen, and Sasha Mercedes has bulked up a little bit, but she was even a smaller woman back then, and it always worked. It always made sense, and it was always booked well. And for Roxanne to work like that, she's going to need good matches, time. I, and I'm not saying it's on her; it's on them. It's not, they're not going to be able to call her up and have her be in the shadows and keep momentum. It's just not the way that character is going to
Yeah.
work because she's an ace in the ring. And
Yeah.
he hasn't really allowed aces in the ring to be over for being aces in the ring the last 2 years, unless I'm missing someone. Michin's the closest. Like, Roxanne getting over is going to be similar to how Michin got over in the last year. And that's great showing after great showing after great showing after great showing.
Is Bianca an ace in the ring?
Now she is, yeah. But she
But
was over already before she was an ace in the ring.
she's so physically, her presence is so overwhelming that
It's different than
she
Roxanne.
doesn't have to be an ace in the ring. She's Bianca Belair. She has the most unstoppable finishing moves. So it's kind of like she could lose the whole match and then hit you with the candy and she could win. And you could literally tell that story that she has this one unstoppable move. So let's talk about it because you brought
Real
up
quick though,
Sasha.
Io's an ace in the ring too, but Io has this aura thing.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that Roxanne doesn't, but the way she's been presented, her character is not just like a come out, don't say a word, kick someone's ass and leave. That's Io. Roxanne's gonna have to talk a little bit, but ultimately be a scrappy badass in the ring. Sorry, go ahead.
No. Actually, you gave me. So Roxanne is 5 feet, right? She's like Sasha Banks is 5'5". We sometimes forget she's actually sneaky tall. Like is
Yeah,
Sasha Banks. Like she's not short. Roxanne has the height of Alexa Bliss, but she is the wrestling equivalent to Sasha Banks, right? Like
right.
like she's a tremendous in-ring performer, but she's the size of Alexa Bliss. Now, far be it to give them any ideas. I don't Alexa Bliss, the way she was booked, at her size and stature was bad. Like she would just beat everybody clean. And that
Right.
was not believable because, and I'm a huge Alexa Bliss fan, she wasn't believable in the ring as being somebody who could beat Bianca Belair's or beat Sasha Banks's or beat Charlotte Flair's. Because she wasn't like the mechanic in the ring to kind of wear you down and end up getting the edge, right?
Yep.
Roxanne is that. So Roxanne, they have to take Sasha Banks and Alexa. What I mean is they have to have the Alexa Bliss microphone version, like the character of how
Right.
confident she is. But in the ring, they need to let her tell the Sasha Banks type of stories. And I'm not talking,
Submissions, mat game, time.
but I'm not talking about WWE Sasha Banks. I'm talking about after WWE Mercedes Monet,
Yeah.
right? Like they need it where she the way they booked her at NXT, they got to figure out a way to do that on the main roster, which is she just always somehow manages to win. Like you think she has her back against the wall, but she's just so clever and so smart that, and it only one time she used outside interference to retain her title, which was the Julia one the first time. But how did she beat Jada Parker? Oh, she gave her the pop rocks on the outside, then threw her in the ring and did it again. Like she has to outmaneuver everybody. And that's how they're
Yeah.
going to have to book her on the main roster because you're right. Like, I mean, God, Rhea Ripley and Bianca Belair, if you put Roxanne in the ring with them, it just on TV looked like such a mismatch.
I would love to see her be a gruesome tactician who goes after ankles and knees. And
Mm-hmm.
because here's my thing, my trepidation comes from, we don't hide from these things when we talk. So there's this thing, people question the way Triple H books black African American wrestlers, not
Except
making
for
it on
Bianca.
PLE, don't
Except
make
for
it on
Bianca.
PLEs except Bianca.
Mm-hmm.
And I would argue that he has no choice with her because she was minted, made John Cena front of the marquee when he took
Mm-hmm.
over already. She was already in the commercials, and so I'm not going to give her credit. I'm not going to give him credit for her. I'm going to give her credit for her. And then women, it's iffy. People are not happy with the way Melo's been booked since he's been up. And what I'm saying is Roxanne is the best women's wrestler they've brought to main roster in the ring since the Horsewomen.
Io.
Yeah, that's fair. Um, I guess I don't count Io because I feel like Io and Oscar were vets, right? Who had been on not WWE main shows, but been on main shows for promotions. So, and I know Roxy is not NXT grown; she was indie grown. Um, I guess I'm counting age too, right? So she's so young. I I just think back to Sasha Banks and Bailey just based on the age, and but the readiness is through the roof. So yes, Io was further along than Roxanne currently is. Asuka was further along than
Mm-hmm.
Roxanne currently is. But from a prodigy prospect standpoint, she's as ready to go in the ring as you can get, and getting that character fit for that main roster work is going to be the key. And we'll see if he can do it. And I don't trust him yet.
I agree with you. It's a very fair assessment of how he has booked call ups
Yeah,
because other than Bianca Belair, the women's side, he hasn't really gotten a call up right
yeah,
because Io was on the main roster. Io was not on the main roster when Bianca came up, but she was winding down NXT, and then she was thinking about going back to Japan, and then they gave her way more money, and they said we're just gonna put you on the main roster. But sneaky, and we don't talk about him, but the guy who used to run the company was a huge Io Shirai fan. He was a big Io fan, like the other guy, not Triple H, the father-in-law. So Io was always going to be booked well for whatever reason. Like she's always been, and a lot of people don't even like her booking as it's currently done, but Yeah, Roxanne's going to be a test. And one thing I want to say before we get to our top 10 is I want to give Vic Joseph. Vic Joseph is the commentator on NXT, right?
Yeah,
With Booker T. I want to give him a lot of credit. What did he say when Roxanne walked up to the ring? He said, there have been huggers, bosses, and queens, but maybe there's never been anybody as good as the prodigy. That was good.
great
That
line.
was that was a great
Such a good line.
callback to three of the best women's NXT champions of all time. And I will argue this until I'm blue in the face. I didn't really think Charlotte was a good NXT women's champion on either occasion. I thought when she was the NXT champion the first time, there was like Sasha was way more over than her. And they took like three matches to get Sasha the belt, and she got it in a fatal four way, which is now going to be down as like the holy grail four horsewomen match because it's the only time they ever actually had the four way.
Right.
The second time, I don't even know what that was. The second NXT run for Charlotte was awful. She beat Rhea when she had no business beating Rhea. Then she lost to Io, but she didn't even take the pin. Rhea took the pin to Io. So it was
Well,
just stupid that time.
I watched that NXT video back about the lineage of that title, and no shade to Charlotte and Becky. Don't have time to say it, but for me, those were the parts where the lineage breaks for me because it's not what that belt's about. And I
Yeah.
understand Becky had some amazing matches and really help put Tiffany on the stage. She had a much more effective version of her run, I think, than Charlotte did, but it's still not necessarily what I remember that title for.
Before we go to our top 10, I have one little caveat to what you just said. You could make the argument that what you're saying and what they're doing are exactly the same thing. What I mean is you're talking about how great the title is, right? Like the lineage, how it's the superstar making belt. Couldn't you say that Becky and now Charlotte didn't need to go back and do it? That was the problem with her. She already did it. She already won the belt. But couldn't you make a case with Becky? And I'm going to make the case for Bianca in the future to go back and win the belt because they could say, you know what, this belt is that prestigious that we have accomplished so much in our career, but we never won that belt and we got to go back and win it. Couldn't you make that case for
If you
both
told
of
the
them?
story right and said it that way, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't like the way they did it with Becky, but I thought the story could have been done where Becky, like, I always felt like what they should have done with Becky is brought her to NXT and have her earn her way to that match and say, this is going to be the crowning achievement of my career. Because again, it's Bianca's going to get that NXT title. People
Yeah.
think I'm joking. People think it's funny. It's not. She's going to win that NXT women's title because she hasn't done it, and they want her resume to be the best ever.
Yep.
So with that being said, I know we're on a very tight time crunch here. We're going to go through our top 10 women's wrestlers of the year. So, do you want to go through your 10 and then I go through my 10, or do you want to do the back and forth?
Probably from a time perspective, we'll go through our 10 each. I want to throw out there it's impossible to not do this controversially. It's impossible.
No,
And let me just give you guys some numbers. You have, let's start with Japan. You have 4 or 5 women in Japan that have had incredible years, pretty much only in Japan. Okay. A couple of them popped over here for a minute, but five, 4 or 5. You've got, a TNA woman who had a fantastic year. You have, when I say women in Japan that had a great year, I wasn't even counting Julia. And, you got Stephanie, you've got 4 or 5 AEW women that had fantastic matches. And then you have several 3 to 5 WWE women that didn't have fantastic matches necessarily as often, but were on TV and very consequential all year. I'm already at 20 people, right? How do you narrow that down to 10? So there will be controversy. Some of y'all won't agree with this, but that's why it's fun. So, but it was impossible to narrow it down to 10. It was really, really hard for me. Do you want me to go first or do you want to go first?
you can go first.
All right. So I went Willow Nightingale, number 10. Uh, Stephanie Vacour, number 9. Bailey, number 8. Athena number 7, Bianca Belair number 6, Statlander number 5, Mayu Iwatani number 4, Roxanne number 3, Io Sky number 2, and my number 1 wrestler of the year was Mercedes Moné. Let me jump in real quick. My 2 hardest omissions were Mariah May and Cirie. I know Cirie had a ton of amazing matches, and I will just say, just call me uneducated. It's out of my orbit. And with how much I loved what all these other 10 women did, um, I just couldn't. It's like I almost went to the point where I'm just like, it would have been dishonest for me to rank her there, like knowing ball that I don't know. Okay,
Mhm.
so I'm just being honest. Mariah, I had her in, I had her out. I like I liked Willow's matches. I thought Willow having the great Mercedes match and the great feud and great match with Chris was a differentiator for me. I Bailey kind of I had her out, and then I just think having that great of a match at WrestleMania has to count for something. And then she had a belt for a very long time throughout the year. I thought Stephanie had some really great matches. She was CML champion for a long time. And Bailey also had the Mako Satomura match, which wasn't televised, so people forget. Athena's been champion for like I think it's going on 2+ years now. Little bit like Roxanne, not as good of matches, but just a lot of really good, nothing really great, but just dominant booking and um, kind of an offensive player of the year type award. Chris got there for match quality. She was in some consequential feuds, and her match. You had the 2 Mercedes matches to what she did with Willow. Um, Bolted her up my list. Mayu, a lot of great quality, not as much quantity. Which, if she kept up the quality she does on a higher quantity, she might have even beat Mercedes. Um, Roxanne, I thought was the best, the most consistent champion we had in women's wrestling this year. If you look at the whole year, um, Io, she was champion for the 4 months. Had the amazing WrestleMania match, the great match with Bianca, the dominant booking most of the year. Um, oh, I kind of skipped over Bianca. Bianca is just the most consequential woman mixed with great in ring on American wrestling TV right now. So I had to put her in there. She
Mhm.
gets in over Rhea and Liv because she did have some really great matches, and her in ring quality's been fantastic. And I'll finish off with probably not a surprise for anyone on this show, but I thought Mercedes from May to the end of the year put up arguably the greatest year of her career in the ring. Um, and I would actually probably say it was. I mean, her last 3 months were incredible, and I'll rewatch 5 matches that she had this year over and over again for the rest of my life. And actually, the one thing she might have been missing some of the better TV stuff. She had great TV with Willow, and even though the match wasn't good, she had great TV with Britt. So that's my list.
Well, our list is very different, and that's good.
Yeah.
We had one wrestler in the exact same position, and that's it. Okay, so my number 10 is Bailey. And the reason I put Bailey at number 10 is because she had the great Royal Rumble win. She had the great match with Io to win the title. And then honestly, after that, she didn't really do much.
Yep.
Like she was a champion that, not to her own fault, the booking just didn't help her. My number 9 was Bianca Belair. And I'm going to echo everything you said. I wanted Bianca to be higher on my list, but the truth is, she's had 2 very good matches this year. Both are on TV. Piper Niven, and obviously the match with Io. And to me, That's not enough to crack a top five, even though I think she's a top five, top three talent. I don't think she
Yep,
had the resume this year to warrant that. Number eight is a woman I saw in person, and it's not Mercedes Monet. It's the other person on that match, which is Watanabe, which is Momo has had two of the best women's matches all year. So her character has become more familiar with the American audiences. She's the leader of a clique in Japan, and she's phenomenal in the ring. So I think when you put out that kind of quality, you got to make my top 10. Number seven is a woman that I was late to the party on, that everybody else was early to the party on, which is Willow Nightingale. Willow had a great year. She had two of the best women's matches of the year. Chris, the street fight, Mercedes in May, and she is so over as a babyface, a pure babyface, that is hard to do in today's modern wrestling. That everybody just agrees to like this person. My number six wrestler, somebody you said didn't make your cut because of your not being as educated, which is Saray. I think she had a better year. She had the classic with Momo. She had the classic with Mayu. She's had the classic with Julia. And the truth is, she is another HBK Triple H blemish. They did not do anything with her,
totally.
and they
No,
dropped
they
the
they
ball with
failed.
her. And she is one of the best women's wrestlers in the world. So number five is Chris Statlander. And, same thing that you said. Chris, to me, showed me she's one of the five best women's wrestlers in the world. She's had a great match with Willow. She's had two classics with Mercedes. She's over. She can wrestle a fast style. She can wrestle a power style. She's just tremendous. Overall, A+ performer. Roxanne is my number four, the most consistent women's champion besides my number one. Hint, hint. So we do have a different number one, but Roxanne in North America was the most consistent champion. She did not have a time where she didn't have a good match. All of her title matches ended up having at least a good conclusion match to it. Number three, Io. I, for most of the year, had Io as my number one. But I have to say, since she lost the title, she's been kind of this. She had the great match with Lyra, but I feel like Io's 2025 might be her year, not 2024. Because if she can win the Rumble and she can beat Rhea, then we're off to the races. Super over, huge fan, probably my favorite women's wrestler, but I just can't put her there. Now, this is the controversy. And I know, especially to who our audience is, they're not going to like this, but so be it. Number two is Mercedes Monet, and here's why. Yes, from the Momo match to the end of the year, she's been absolutely on fire. She has not missed. She has hit at every level of a match. But we cannot pretend like the summer didn't happen. The Brit match was not good. The Sheeta second match was not good. And to me, she's better than that, where she should be able to get through that. But let's be honest here. Before the mobile match, there was she still got it kind of lingering. So to me, she's number two, but I will make the case here. She's the number one overall woman in the business, but she's not the number one wrestler. I know that's like hedging, but because of how she got the salary, how she has expanded women's wrestling, she's like my number one valedictorian, but not my number one in the ring wrestler. And my number one in the ring wrestler is Mayu Iotani. And simply put, she hasn't had a bad match this year. All her matches have been great. So, yes, you can make the argument, well, you know what? She only wrestles 5 times a year. And if that's the case, she hit on every single one of them. And I think that there's something to be said that when you go out there, the expectation is you're going to have the best women's match of all time. That's the kind of bar she and Mercedes, to be fair, are on now, where every time they go out there and wrestle, you expect a classic. And she's
Yep.
delivered this year. Now, yeah, her quantity is not up there, but her quality is. So it's Mayu one, Mercedes two, EO three. We have the same. We don't have the same top three. We don't even have the same number one. We only had Chris as five.
but we did have the same women in the top five, the same exact
Yes.
women in the top
Yes.
five.
Yes, that's
And
true.
for every one of our listeners, just so you guys know, we don't work on this at all together.
No.
So that shows alignment, but also free thinking. It's funny is because Saray is your version of Athena for me, where it's like you you know, I probably get a little bit more into the R, and I'm not keeping up with ROH weekly, but when I reviewed all of Saray's matches and Athena's matches, just my knowledge of who Athena was wrestling probably helps me um, get into it a little bit more than whereas you're very versed in Japanese women's wrestling and not, I know Momo, I know who they're wrestling, but just also what their characters and arcs are too.
In our group chat, I asked both of you, I said, are you a John Cena fan? And you said,
Nope,
okay,
never was, never.
exactly how you are with John Cena. I'm kind of like that with Athena.
Yeah,
Like the truth is, I went back and I did my due diligence and watched her matches, but her matches, other than the Oscar match, have never really hit for me. Like the Oscar match is when I was like, oh, maybe I've had it wrong this whole time about her. But I don't know. There's something to her that's missing for me. Like, and I don't know what it is. Like maybe she has the feud with Mercedes and she blows my socks away and I totally changed my mind. But the toughest one I had to leave off the list was Julia. Because
yep.
going in until 11 o'clock last night, my time, Julia was my number 10, Bailey was off the list, and Mercedes was my number one, and Mayu was number two. And I just went back and I said, okay, I am making a list for the 10 best in ring women's wrestlers. I'm not making a list for the best characters, the most over of YouTube views. I'm making it for in the ring. And I think the best thing that's ever happened to Mercedes is the bad match with Britt and the bad match with Sheeta, because I think it lit a fire under her that we got some of the best women's matches of all time after that. But it's part of her story. Like, I think the
Yeah.
bounce back is just as good as being, the best women's wrestler maybe of all time. And she has a claim to that. And the only reason I had Mercedes and I was gonna say she was gonna be one and that I flip flop back and forth is Mayu is getting into that Rhea Ripley territory for me, where when she loses, my mouth will be on the floor because she's booked in such a way that even the commentators tell you, yeah, we don't think she's gonna lose, but she might struggle in this match. And the one thing I love about Mercedes is I think she's gonna lose every match, but she's actually won every single match
You,
outside of WWE.
yeah, you can always be convinced that Mercedes is going to lose a match. Not only a little bit of PTSD from WWE, but the way she lays out her matches, I mean, shit, in the middle of what ended up being her greatest main roster run, where she was on TV all year, she dominated TV time all year.
Mm-hmm.
She won a Hell in a Cell match against Bailey, and in her first defense, she laid out that match against Carmella in a way where I literally, as it's happening, I'm like, oh my god, she lost, and played on that loses her first title defense thing. I'll never forget that spot when Carmella got her in like the face buster, and it was just like, dude, oh my god, she's gonna lose. So there's brilliance there in the way that she books herself. I
Yeah,
thought if you pulled me aside and said, hey, they're bringing over this this renowned Japanese women's wrestler who's one of the great Stardom women's wrestlers, but no one in America knows who she is, and she's going to beat Mercedes in a strong style evolved. I'd be like, that's crazy. That's not the right way for Mercedes to lose. And in the match, like 10 times, I thought she was going to lose. So
like you're talking about Hazuki, right?
yeah, of course.
My thing with Mayu is I see why Mayu doesn't want to come to the United States and wrestle, like in NXT or WWE or AEW, because she's never going to get the protection she gets in Stardom. She never will, right? Like you're gonna have like Mercedes. Everybody's like, oh, she has to lose. She's gonna lose. Mayu, I
Yeah,
don't know, when she's gonna lose, but I know you got a flight to catch.
I
So on
do.
that note, safe travels to New York. I know this is
Appreciate it.
a conference you look forward to, and you and your team have fun. I will be. We'll see if I make it to next week, depending on how this result of this game happens. But it's a very it's a very big day in this house because obviously, Eagles are playing the Packers. It's two big brand franchises, two big TV, teams. And honestly, the Packers have every element that scares me as an Eagles fan. They have a really good head coach. They have a quarterback that has a gunslinger mentality who, when you go up against the number one defense, which I'd like to point out we are, you have to have that mentality. You can't be scared. And the one thing about
Right.
Jordan Love is he'll chuck the ball. He might chuck it and throw 5 interceptions, but he could chuck it and throw 6 touchdowns. Like you don't know which version of him shows up. And the other thing is they have a running game that is on the level of ours. Like they have a
Yeah.
really dominant running game. So I'm gonna
Josh
be
Jacobs has been, yeah.
been great. He's been great.
We support each other on this podcast. I
Yep.
root for the Eagles for you. I know you root for the Lions for me. Um, Ultimately, hopefully, we root against each other in 2 weeks from now.
In Michigan.
In
It would
Michigan.
have
Yep.
to be in Michigan, yeah.
I also have no trouble rooting against the Packers, so I will enjoy. Hopefully, you guys beating them up a little bit tonight. So,
What I'm hoping for, there's a scenario that I want, which is next. Look, okay, Eagles win, Commanders win, Vikings win, or Rams win, because it's exactly the perfect scenario for us next week, which is I hate the Commanders. So I'm going to be like with the Lions flag waving. And I know a lot of my friends are like, wait a minute, if the Commanders beat the Lions, Raj, and the Eagles win, the Eagles get the home game in the NFC title. But you know what? I'd rather go to Detroit and lose than see the Commanders have any type of success. And to me, seeing them get into an NFC championship game, even if they lose to the Eagles and we get to go to the Super Bowl, means they're successful. And I don't like it. The other side is if the Vikings or the Rams come to Philadelphia, I have all of Lions fans rooting for us because they don't like the Vikings at all and they don't like Matt Stafford anymore. So I don't know where you guys have turned on Matt Stafford, but I have a lot of Lions fans on my algorithm and they do not like him and they don't like his wife
well,
either.
his wife is definitely a little outspoken. I will say my wife is a Rams fan and loves Matthew Stafford. So what I'm rooting for is I do need the Commanders to win, and I'll tell you why. I don't want that circus next week. I don't want to play the
Yeah.
Rams. I don't want to play the Vikings for a third time. Truthfully, it's hard to beat any team 3 times. I'm not afraid of them. It's just math. It's hard to beat good teams three
Mm-hmm.
times. So I'm going Commanders tonight. That way we play them. We haven't played them. I'd love that to be the game. And then I want the Rams to win to play you guys. And then actually, that's my team, my brother-in-law's team, your team, and my wife's team would be the
Mm-hmm.
4 teams. So
I know a
that's
lot of
that's the rooting
Lions
guide for the
fans
week.
say something that I didn't think about, but they're actually right. A lot of Lions fans who are on my algorithm say they want the Eagles, and here's why. They're like, not because we think they're easy, it's actually the other way. Because we're not going to have our guard down against that team. Like, we're going to get the
Right.
best Dan Campbell, we're going to get the best Ben Johnson game plan because that's the bully, like that's the team that everybody in the media kind of almost says has passed Detroit. And they're like, if we can get to Philadelphia, we're not going to take our foot off the gas. Minnesota, the Commanders, these are teams that for whatever reason Lions fans get a little worried about, like, will we take it easy, will we not bring our A game? But against Philadelphia, they're like, we're going to bring it. We might lose, but we're going to bring it, and we're not going to,
My
like, yeah.
my perfect path is Commanders Philadelphia because we haven't played either one of you, and I know that we'll game plan afresh. We won't take the Commanders lightly because we haven't been on the field with them. Um, Teams we've beat already this year, I don't want to play again. So I do got to run. I hope
Yep.
everyone enjoyed our list. As always, throw your top 10. Tell us how wrong we got it in the comments, and appreciate you guys tuning in.
All right, safe travels.
Thanks.